On December 26, 1900, the relief ship Hesperus pulled into the shadow of Eilean Mor, a jagged shard of basalt rising from the North Atlantic. For Joseph Moore, the relief keeper standing on the deck, the island felt fundamentally altered. Usually, his arrival was met with a flurry of activity. The three men on duty would be at the landing stage, ready to assist with the ropes and eager for the mail and fresh supplies from the mainland. Instead, there was a stillness that seemed to swallow the sound of the ship's whistle. No flag was raised. No one appeared on the winding cliffside path. Moore rowed ashore alone, his boots crunching onto the slippery east landing. As he began the ascent of the 160 stone steps cut into the rock, the silence became a physical weight. When he finally reached the lighthouse entrance and pushed open the heavy door, he didn't find the wreckage of a storm or the signs of a struggle. He found a scene that looked perfectly normal, yet felt utterly wrong. In the kitchen, a meal of salted mutton and potatoes sat on the table. The fat on the meat had congealed into a hard white crust, suggesting it had been left there for over a week. One chair was overturned on the floor, as if someone had stood up in a violent hurry. The clock on the wall had stopped. Moore moved through the living quarters, his voice echoing in the hollow rooms. He found the beds neatly made and the lamps cleaned and ready to be lit. But the most disturbing detail was found in the hallway. Two of the three sets of heavy oilskin coats and sea boots were missing. In the brutal December weather of the Outer Hebrides, no experienced keeper would ever step outside without their protective gear. To do so was to invite a swift death from exposure. Yet the lighthouse was locked from the inside. This was a locked room mystery at the edge of the world. Three professional men had vanished from a high-security stone tower, leaving behind a half-eaten dinner and a door they had seemingly locked behind them as they stepped out into a void. To understand the gravity of this disappearance, we have to look at the men who were lost. These were not novices prone to panic. They were some of the most stable and experienced keepers in the Northern Lighthouse Board. James Ducat, the principal keeper, was 43 years old, with a spotless 20-year record. He was a disciplined leader and a family man, with a wife and children waiting for him on the mainland. He viewed the lighthouse as a fortress of routine. For Ducat, the rules of the service were absolute. He was the kind of man who found comfort in the predictable rhythms of the sea, making him an unlikely candidate for a mental breakdown. Thomas Marshall, the second assistant, was 28. He was a meticulous record keeper, a man of detail who took pride in the mechanical perfection of the light. Marshall was quiet and professional, the kind of person who ensured every pint of paraffin was accounted for in the station's logs. Donald MacArthur, the 40-year-old occasional keeper, was the muscle of the group. He was a veteran substitute, filling in for a sick colleague. MacArthur was known as a tough nut, a man of immense physical strength, who had spent his life battling the Atlantic. He was a hardened sailor who had seen every horror the ocean could throw at a man and remained unmoved. These three men were chosen for the Flannan Isles specifically because of their mental toughness. Eilean Mor was a grueling post. The daily grind involved hauling 50-pound canisters of oil up those 160 stairs to fuel the great light. It was back-breaking work that required constant focus. But there was a hidden danger inside the tower that few people in 1900 fully understood. The heart of the lighthouse was its massive Fresnel lens. To allow this multi-ton glass apparatus to rotate with minimal friction, it didn't sit on traditional bearings. Instead, it floated in a circular trough filled with hundreds of pounds of liquid mercury. Every day, the keepers had to lean over this mercury bath to clean the lens and maintain the mechanism. In the cramped, poorly ventilated lantern room, they were breathing in mercury vapors for hours on end. Modern science tells us that prolonged exposure to mercury causes neurological devastation, tremors, extreme paranoia, and vivid hallucinations. It was the Mad Hatter syndrome, occurring in real time inside a stone cylinder surrounded by nothing but churning grey water. While the men were physically strong, their minds were being slowly eroded by the very substance that made the lighthouse function. As the winter of 1900 deepened, this toxic environment was met with a series of events that would push their sanity to the breaking point. The timeline of their descent began on December 15th, when the steamer Arthur passed the islands and noticed the light was out. But the true mystery wouldn't be uncovered until Mor found the station's logbook. The entries for the final days were not the cold, technical notes expected of professional keepers. They were something else entirely. The logbook, discovered by Joseph Moore on the desk in the small office, became the most haunting piece of evidence in the entire investigation. In the Lighthouse service, the log is a sacred document. It is where facts go to live. But the entries from December 12th to the 15th read like a descent into a collective nightmare. Thomas Marshall, the man of data and precision, had recorded observations that simply did not align with the world outside the tower. On December 12th, Marshall wrote about a gale so fierce he had never seen its equal in 20 years. He noted that James Ducat, the stoic leader, was very quiet, and that Donald MacArthur, the physical powerhouse of the group, was crying. This is a detail that investigators have struggled with for a century. What could possibly terrify a man like MacArthur, who had spent his life on the deck of ships in the North Atlantic, to the point of tears? The entry for December 13th was even more surreal. Marshall wrote that the storm was still raging, and that all three men were huddled together praying. This breaks every protocol of the Northern Lighthouse Board. During a storm, keepers are supposed to be at their posts, securing the equipment and monitoring the light. They are not supposed to be paralyzed by religious fervor. But the real chill comes from the mainland weather reports. Every station on the Isle of Lewis and every ship within 50 miles confirmed that the weather on those days was overcast but calm. There was no gale. The sea was moderate. This suggests a terrifying possibility. Either the men were experiencing a shared hallucination, potentially triggered by the mercury vapors, or Eilean Mor was trapped in a localized weather anomaly that existed only in their reality. The final entry, written on December 15th, was the most cryptic. Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all. That night, the Archter saw the darkness, and the three men were never seen again. When the investigation team moved outside to the West Landing, they sought a physical explanation to anchor this psychological horror. They found it at a height of 110 feet above sea level. The Atlantic had manifested a force of such raw violence that it seemed to belong to a different world. A massive supply box, bolted to the concrete with heavy iron rods, had been ripped out and pulverized into splinters. Iron railings, thick and solid, were twisted into shapes that looked like modern art. This evidence points to the rogue wave theory. A rogue wave is a wall of water, often twice the size of surrounding waves, that occurs when multiple wave systems align. When a wave like this hits a sheer cliff, it doesn't just crash, it compresses. The pressure can reach thousands of pounds per square foot, capable of shredding iron and bone. The most grounded theory is that Ducat and Marshall went down to the landing to secure the ropes as they saw a massive surge approaching. MacArthur, watching from the gallery, saw the water rising to a height that shouldn't be possible. He ran out to warn them, forgetting his coat and boots in the panic. He reached the landing just as the wave crested the cliff, and in an instant, all three were swept into the churning black water. But this theory still clashes with the locked room reality. If MacArthur ran out in a life or death hurry, why did he lock the door behind him? Why were the coats left inside? And if the sea was calm, according to the final log entry, why would they be down at the landing at all? Then there is the dark possibility of internal conflict. Isolation does strange things to the human psyche. The internal lock on the door suggests that whatever happened while they were together inside. Could a petty argument over the week's rations or a missed shift have triggered a mental snap? If one man became homicidal, the overturned chair in the kitchen takes on a much more sinister meaning. Perhaps one man killed the others, disposed of the bodies, and then gave himself to the sea, leaving behind the logbook entries as a final desperate distraction. Finally, we cannot ignore the folklore that permeates the Outer Hebrides. The locals on the Isle of Lewis called the Flannans the Valley of Tears. They believed the islands were inhabited by ancient entities, the phantom hunters, who demanded a tithe from anyone who stayed too long. They spoke of a wind that could shave a man from a rock. While modern investigators dismissed this as superstition, the reputation of Eilean Mor as a cursed place was so strong that for years after the disappearance, it was difficult to find men willing to serve there. Today, the Flannan Isles light is automated. No one hauls oil cans up the stairs. No one polishes the lens over a mercury bath. The 160 steps lead to a tower that is now a monument to a mystery that will likely never be solved. James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur are still out there. Their bodies part of the salt and the silt. Their final moments locked forever in the silence of the North Atlantic. The sea is excellent at keeping its secrets, and Eilean Mor is perhaps its greatest.